ever felt like your brain is just stuck? Not just busy, but really jammed up, like replaying conversations constantly, or maybe doubting decisions you made weeks ago, or even imagining these awful worst-case scenarios for things that haven't even happened yet.
Yes, absolutely. That feeling is so common.
It's more than just tiring, isn't it? It feels like a kind of mental quicksand. It just pulls you away from actually, living your life.
And that right there, that's pretty much the definition of overthinking. It's important to see it's not about productive problem solving. It's thinking so much, often kind of in circles, that you just get trapped.
Trapped, yeah.
It ends up creating problems that aren't really there, or, making small issues feel absolutely enormous. You're analyzing, sure, but you're not actually getting anywhere.
It really is like your brain is a computer that suddenly decided to open 100 tabs at once. And every single tab is running some stressful, totally energy-draining scenario. Everything just grinds to a halt. You're worrying about the past, the future, what someone might be thinking, all at the same time.
It's that mental traffic jam, a complete gridlock.
And the harder you try to think your way out, the worse it gets.
You've really hit the core of it there.
Yeah.
So our mission really in this deep dive is to give you some insights, some practical tools to start untangling that mental gridlock. The idea is to clear your mind, help you take back control.
Think of this as your shortcut to getting properly informed on this whole topic, because it affects so many of us.
It really does.
Okay, but let's make a really important distinction straight away. We're not saying thinking itself is bad. I mean, deep thinking, careful planning, those are vital skills, right?
Absolutely crucial.
So where's the line? When does helpful, forward-moving thinking tip over into that draining overthinking?
Well, that's the key difference, isn't it? Productive thinking, what you might call deep thinking, it always moves you forward somehow. It helps you understand things better, maybe leads to a solution or a decision. Overthinking, though, it just keeps you stuck. It's like going down that rabbit hole people talk about. You dive deeper and deeper into one thought, but often there's no actual solution at the bottom. It's just a loop.
A loop, yeah. Feels productive maybe, but it isn't.
Sometimes, yeah, it can feel like you're working hard mentally, but often it's really just a clever way our brain avoids, taking action. If we're hesitant about doing something, the brain goes, oh, let's just think about it a little more.
And that a little more never ends.
Precisely.
So it sounds like pretty much everyone could fall into this trap. From your research, what are some of the main reasons people start overthinking in the first place?
Well, a really big one often is a deep-seated fear of failure. We get so scared of making the wrong choice that our mind just runs through every single possibility endlessly.
Instead of actually making any choice.
Exactly. It's paralysis by analysis, as they say.
And I guess that's tied pretty closely to perfectionism, too. That feeling that anything less than perfect is just unacceptable.
Oh, definitely. For someone really focused on perfectionism, any tiny flaw feels like a major failure. So they analyze every single detail, trying desperately to avoid any mistake, however small.
Which just causes more stress and, more overthinking.
You got it. And then there are past experiences. If something painful happened before, your brain naturally tries to protect you from repeating it.
Makes sense.
But that protection mechanism can easily become its own trap, keeping you stuck analyzing the past instead of moving forward. And finally, in a world that often feels really uncertain, overthinking can offer this illusion of control.
Illusion, right, because it's not real.
Not real control, no. But it feels like you're doing something productive, tackling the uncertainty, when actually you're often just spinning your wheels mentally. It creates a false sense of security.
Okay, so just to nail down some of the terms we're using here, when we say perfectionism, we mean that really demanding internal standard, where anything short of perfect feels like failure.
Exactly.
And an illusion that's something that seems real but isn't, like that feeling of control you get from overthinking.
Uh-huh.
And when we say overthinking makes things seem bigger, we mean it exaggerates the issues, blows them out of proportion.
Precisely. And, you know, the really hopeful thing in all of this?
What's that?
Overthinking isn't some fixed personality trait you're just stuck with forever. It's a mental pattern. And the good news is patterns can absolutely be changed.
That's huge. So throughout this deep dive, we're going to unpack how you can start recognizing these patterns in yourself. Figure out what actually triggers them for you personally.
Yeah, the triggers are key.
And most importantly, how to build a completely new way of thinking. One that brings, peace instead of all that pressure.
The goal isn't to stop feeling things or become careless. It's about learning to respond thoughtfully rather than just reacting automatically. Creating a bit of space, really, between a thought popping into your head and how you act on it.
And we'll even touch on some of those phrases people actually use, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm totally overthinking this, or my mind is racing, or that classic, I just need to clear my head.
Exactly. Those everyday expressions capture the feeling perfectly.
Okay, so we've got a handle on what overthinking is and sort of the broad reasons why we do it. But now let's dig into something maybe a bit more subtle. The hidden triggers.
Right. These are the things that quietly push you into that overthinking habit, often without you even noticing, like small leaks in a boat that eventually cause a big problem that can create these powerful mental storms.
So when you say trigger, it's not always something obvious, like a big stressful event.
Not always, no. It could be something small, maybe a particular situation, even just a fleeting thought, or sometimes even interacting with a certain person, anything that sets off that spiral.
So what are some of the common, maybe less obvious triggers?
Well, one of the biggest and perhaps most pervasive is uncertainty. Our minds just naturally hate not knowing. We crave answers. So when the future is unclear, we try to predict every single possible outcome.
We're asking, what if, what if, what if?
Exactly. What if it goes wrong? What if I fail? What if they don't like it? That fundamental lack of certainty makes us deeply uncomfortable. But, life is uncertain, right?
Yeah, that's kind of the deal.
Trying to control everything is it's impossible. And frankly, it's exhausting. Learning to live with uncertainty rather than constantly fighting it is far more effective.
That really rings true. It's like our brain wants a problem to solve, and when there isn't a clear one, it just keeps spinning, looking for one. What else acts as a hidden trigger?
Another major one is low self-confidence. If you don't really trust your own judgment, you tend to second-guess yourself. Constantly. Ever catch yourself thinking, I just don't trust myself to make the right call here? That's a huge flag for overthinking fueled by self-doubt. Without that basic belief in your own ability, even simple things can feel incredibly risky.
Which leads to endless reevaluation.
Precisely. Overthinking becomes this sort of protective shield, an attempt to avoid making a mistake. But what it really ends up doing is helping you avoid life.
Wow. Yeah, I can see how that creates that constant mental replay you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. And that ties straight into another very common trigger.
Yeah.
The fear of judgment. Worrying intensely about what other people think of you.
Oh, yeah. Wanting to look good, sound smart.
Be accepted, fundamentally. This fear is what drives that relentless mental replay after social interactions. You go over things you said, things you did, trying to figure out how others perceived you.
It's exhausting.
Incredibly draining. It keeps your brain on high alert, almost making social situations feel inherently dangerous or risky.
It sounds like a vicious cycle, too. The more you worry about judgment, maybe the less natural you act, which then gives you even more to worry about afterwards.
That's often exactly how it plays out.
Any other big triggers we should know about?
Well, we touched on it earlier, but perfectionism is a really powerful one, acting as a trigger itself. It's not just about having high standards. It's that paralyzing fear of any perceived flaw.
Right.
Perfectionists set the bar incredibly high, often impossibly high. And when they inevitably fall short, even slightly, they can start obsessing, overthinking what went wrong, how to fix it, how to prevent it next time.
Instead of just doing the thing, they get stuck planning it perfectly.
Exactly. Think about wanting to, say, post something online or maybe practice speaking English in a group. The perfectionist mind keeps editing, re-editing, planning, doubting until it feels safe. But often, safe means it never actually happens. The thoughts win, the action doesn't.
And it's not just worries about the future, right? Past stuff can trigger it too.
Oh, absolutely. Past trauma or significant failure can be a huge trigger. Painful memories can really ignite overthinking because your mind is desperately trying to prevent anything similar from ever happening again.
Which makes sense, but
But instead of helping you move forward wiser, it just pulls you back into analyzing the past event. A bad breakup might make you overanalyze every tiny detail in a new relationship. A setback at work might make you second-guess every future decision.
so those past experiences create these mental red flags that just set off the alarm bells.
Precisely, sending you right back into overanalysis mode.
Okay, so given all these potential triggers, some hidden, some maybe more obvious, how do you even start figuring out what your specific triggers are? Because you can't really change what you don't understand, right?
That's the crucial first step. Your main task initially is simply to observe your own mind. Like a curious scientist, just watch what's happening in there without judgment. Notice the situations that tend to make you feel anxious or overwhelmed. What kinds of thoughts keep looping? When do you feel most stuck in your head? A really practical exercise is to just briefly jot down your thoughts when you notice yourself overthinking.
Just write them down.
Yeah, don't analyze them, don't judge them, just capture them. Like worrying about the presentation tomorrow or replaying that conversation with my boss. This simple act starts to create a bit of distance.
So you're not in the thought anymore, you're looking at it.
Exactly. And that space is where understanding begins. You start to see patterns. Maybe it's always before a social event or when you have unstructured time or after you receive feedback. You might note the trigger, if upcoming job interview, the thought, what if I mess up? The feeling, nervousness, uncertainty, and the result. Endless mental rehearsal. Tracking this makes you aware, and awareness truly is always the first step toward change.
That makes a lot of sense. Pinpointing those triggers seems really helpful. But, sometimes it's genuinely hard to tell if you're just, thinking productively or if you've slipped into overthinking. Thinking is good, right? It's how we solve problems.
Absolutely. Thinking is one of our greatest tools, and you've hit on a really key point, knowing where thinking crosses the line into overthinking. Many people, native English speakers included, grapple with this distinction.
Yeah.
So let's try to draw that line clearly. What separates helpful, productive thinking from that draining, stressful overthinking? Understanding this difference is vital.
Okay, let's break it down. What's the first major difference?
Purpose. I'd say the first one is thinking solves while overthinking stalls. Productive thinking usually has a clear goal. You ask questions, you gather information, you look for answers, and ideally, you arrive at a decision or at least move forward in your understanding.
Like, what time should I leave to get there on time? Or what ingredients do I need for dinner? Simple, goal-oriented questions.
Exactly. Useful questions. But overthinking, it rarely leads to actual action or solution. It just circles around and around a problem, often without finding a way out. You ask, but what if the train is delayed? What if I miss the whole meeting? Or what if nobody likes a dinner I cook? What if I poison everyone? Okay, maybe not that extreme.
Maybe sometimes it feels that extreme.
Right. Overthinking just layers on fear, doubt, negative what ifs. It doesn't answer the original question, it just breeds more questions, more anxiety. It stalls progress.
Okay, solves versus stalls. Got it. What's next?
The second distinction is about what's driving the thoughts. Thinking relies more on logic, while overthinking is often driven by emotion. When you're thinking clearly, you tend to use facts, reason, past evidence. But when you overthink, you're usually reacting emotionally, maybe with fear or guilt or anxiety, even if the actual facts don't really support that feeling.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Logical thinking might say, okay, I prepared for the presentation, I know the material, I'll do my best. But emotional overthinking might scream, what if I freeze up? What if I forget everything? What if they think I'm stupid and I lose my job?
Wow. Yeah, big difference.
Emotion isn't bad, of course. It's essential. But when raw emotion completely hijacks your thought process, your mind gets noisy, foggy, filled with anxiety rather than clarity.
Okay, logic versus emotion. Third distinction.
This is a big one. Thinking leads to decisions. Overthinking leads to hesitation. The whole point of productive thinking is usually to help us decide something, to choose a path, to give us direction.
Right.
Overthinking, however, almost always causes hesitation. That pause before acting just gets longer and longer because you're terrified of making the wrong move. Imagine you want to contribute in a meeting. A thinking mind might say, okay, I have an idea, I'll share it. If it's not perfect, that's okay. But the overthinking mind goes, wait, what if it sounds dumb? What if someone else says it better? What if the boss disagrees? Maybe I should just wait.
And that hesitation becomes a habit.
Exactly. And when that hesitation becomes chronic, it can turn into actual paralysis, that feeling of being mentally frozen, unable to move forward at all.
Okay. Decisions versus hesitation. What's the fourth difference?
Thinking brings clarity. Overthinking brings cloudiness. When you engage in healthy thinking, things usually become clearer. You understand the situation better, you see options. But when you overthink, you often feel more confused, not less.
Yeah, that's true.
Clarity feels sort of light, focused, confident maybe. Cloudiness feels heavy, noisy, tangled. You might feel like you're getting closer to an answer because you're thinking so hard, but really you're just getting more mentally exhausted. People even say, my mind feels foggy. That's the feeling of overthinking. The harder you try to see, the more lost you can feel.
Clarity versus cloudiness. Is there a fifth one?
Yes, finally. Thinking accepts reasonable risk. Overthinking tries to avoid risk altogether. Look, pretty much no decision in life is 100% guaranteed safe or perfect. Every action has some element of risk, even if it's small. Healthy thinking helps you acknowledge that risk, assess it reasonably, and then move forward anyway. Overthinking, on the other hand, desperately tries to eliminate all risk, which is just impossible.
So thinking says, okay, there's a chance this might not work out perfectly, but I'll learn from it.
Right. While overthinking says, I won't do anything until I am absolutely 100% certain that nothing can possibly go wrong. That's not confidence. That's usually fear masquerading as caution.
That's a really helpful breakdown. So the next time you find yourself deep in thought, maybe ask yourself, am I actually finding solutions here or just creating more questions? Am I using logic or just reacting emotionally? Is this helping me move towards a decision or am I just stuck hesitating? Does this feel clearer or foggier? Am I accepting risk or trying to avoid it completely?
Exactly. Learning to spot the difference is key. It's not about shutting down your thoughts. It's about guiding them in a way that actually helps you rather than hinders you.
Okay, so now that we can better distinguish thinking from overthinking, let's talk about how this pattern actually shows up in everyday life. Because it's not just happening inside your head, right? It spills out into your actions, your sleep, your relationships.
Oh, absolutely. It silently but powerfully impacts almost everything. Many people don't even connect the dots. They just feel constantly tired or anxious or maybe unmotivated without quite knowing why. Often it's because their brain has been working overtime, but on all the wrong things.
So what's one common sign?
One of the most insidious ways it shows up is that decision-making becomes a real struggle. Even simple choices, what to wear today, what to have for lunch, when to send that email, can feel incredibly heavy and complicated.
Yeah, I've been there. Endless pros and cons lists.
Right. Endless lists, but no action. Or maybe constantly asking other people for their opinion, needing validation, or changing your mind back and forth repeatedly. It creates this awful loop of doubt. You start fearing making the wrong choice more than you fear not making a choice at all.
Like being in a restaurant, staring at the menu forever.
That's a perfect example. 10 options, you spend 20 minutes agonizing. Oh, what if I don't like this one? Maybe that other one is better. What did they have last time? By the time you finally order, all the enjoyment is kind of gone.
Definitely. And I imagine that struggle bleeds into how we interact with people, too.
Hugely. A really pervasive impact is how conversations just replay endlessly in your mind. After you talk to someone, do you find yourself mentally going over the whole exchange again and again?
Yes. Analyzing every word.
Reanalyzing what you said, worrying about how they interpreted it, wondering if you sounded okay or if you maybe sounded foolish. This habit makes social interactions feel loaded, almost unsafe. You're not just present in the conversation, you're simultaneously judging your own performance.
Which makes it really hard to genuinely connect with people. You're too busy in your own head. I admit, I think I once spent about an hour mentally rewriting an email I'd already sent.
Haha. Oh, I think many of us have done variations of that. It's that feeling of, I just keep playing that conversation over in my head.
And speaking of things keeping us up, overthinking must wreck your sleep, right?
Yeah, it's a massive sleep disruptor. When your mind is stuck in that overactive mode, falling asleep or staying asleep becomes a real battle. Many overthinkers lie there in bed, absolutely exhausted physically, but their brain just refuses to switch off.
That's good.
Revisiting the day's events, worrying about everything on tomorrow's to-do list, sometimes even creating imaginary arguments or planning out responses to things that haven't happened. Your body needs rest, but your mind is running a marathon.
And then being sleep deprived just makes the anxiety worse the next day.
Exactly. It's a vicious cycle. A quick tip here sometimes is just try writing down all those swirling thoughts in a notebook right before bed. Get them out of your head and onto the page. Sometimes that simple act of dumping them is enough to allow your mind to finally rest.
Like a mental offload. That makes sense. What else does overthinking steal from us on a daily basis?
Something really critical. It makes you miss the present moment. It constantly pulls your attention away from where you actually are right here, right now.
So you're physically there, but mentally somewhere else.
Precisely. Lost in thought. Maybe you're out for a walk, but you're thinking about a difficult conversation from last week. Or you're eating a meal, but you're worrying about an exam coming up tomorrow. Or maybe you're spending time with friends, but instead of really listening, you're busy planning what you're going to say next to sound smart.
Life is happening now, but your head is stuck in the past or future.
Exactly. You end up missing what's right in front of you, the sights, the sounds, the actual experience of living.
And finally, it feels like the ultimate consequence of all this is that overthinking causes us to delay opportunities, maybe even miss them entirely.
It absolutely does. Overthinking often cleverly disguises itself as being careful or thorough or responsible, but peel back those layers and very often it's just fear wearing a sensible mask.
How does it cause delay?
You wait, you plan, you analyze, you prepare. You do so much mental work that you simply miss the window of opportunity. You tell yourself things like, oh, I'm not quite ready yet, or I just need a bit more time to think this through, or maybe later when things calm down, or when I feel more confident.
But the perfect time never really comes, does it?
Rarely, if ever. And by the time you finally feel ready, if you ever do, the chance might have passed you by. Think about wanting to apply for that interesting job, or start that creative project, or speak up about something important, but your thoughts keep spinning those what-if stories, creating roadblocks, so you just don't do it.
And then you're left with regret.
Often, yes, regret and frustration. But the key thing to remember is that these patterns, the decision struggles, the replaying, the sleep issues, missing the present, delaying action, they aren't character flaws. They are learned habits. And the wonderful thing about habits is
They can be changed.
Exactly. They can absolutely be changed.
Okay, this is great. We've defined it. We've looked at triggers, the difference from useful thinking, and how it messes with daily life. Now for the really empowering bit. Practical techniques you can use to actually calm your mind when it starts spinning.
Yes, let's get practical. And the goal here isn't to somehow achieve a completely blank mind. That's probably impossible and not even desirable.
Right, not about erasing thoughts.
No, it's about learning to guide them, creating some mental space so your thoughts aren't running wild like panicked horses, but maybe walking more calmly beside you. So here are 5 simple but genuinely powerful techniques you can start trying literally today.
Okay, I'm ready. Technique number 1.
First, name your thoughts. The very first step towards calming your mind is simply becoming aware of what's actually going on in there. So when you notice a thought starting to spiral, just label it.
Label it.
Instead of getting swept away by a worry, just pause and mentally say, this is a worry. Or, okay, that's a memory popping up. That's a fear. That's my inner critic urging again. By simply naming the type of thought, you instantly create a little bit of distance between yourself, the observer, and the thought itself.
So you're not inside the worry anymore. You're looking at it.
Precisely. That tiny gap gives you back some power. You're less likely to automatically believe it or get carried away by it. For instance, if the thought is, I always mess things up, instead of just accepting it as fact, you can say, okay, that's a self-critical thought. It changes the dynamic immediately.
Okay, name the thought. Simple, but I can see how that creates space. What's technique number 2?
Second, try setting a worry timer. Now, this might sound a bit weird, maybe counterintuitive.
Like scheduling time to worry.
Exactly. But it can be surprisingly effective. Pick a specific limited time slot in your day, say just 10 or 15 minutes. During that time, you actively allow yourself to worry. Get a notebook. Write down everything that's bothering you, every what if. Don't hold back. Then, when the timer goes off, you stop. Close the notebook. Tell your brain, maybe even out loud, okay, that's my scheduled worry time, done for today.
What does that achieve?
It gives your worrying mind a clear boundary. Instead of letting anxieties spill over and hijack your entire day, you contain them within that specific window. Your brain gets the attention it seems to crave for its worries, but you remain in control of when and for how long it dominates.
Interesting. Containing the worry. Okay, number 3.
Third, use the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding method. This is an incredibly effective technique for pulling yourself out of a thought spiral and back into the present moment, especially when you feel really overwhelmed or anxious.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How does it work?
It's super simple and uses your senses. You deliberately notice and name 5 things you can currently see around you. Then 4 things you can physically touch or feel. Then 3 things you can hear right now. Then 2 things you can smell. And finally, 1 thing you can taste, or just notice the taste in your mouth.
Why does that help?
It instantly shifts your focus away from the chaotic storm inside your head and onto the concrete reality of your physical surroundings and senses. It's like an emergency brake for a racing mind. It sends a signal to your brain, hey, we're actually safe, we're here, we're in the now. Try it next time you feel overwhelmed. It takes less than a minute and can be remarkably calming.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, technique number 4.
Our 4th technique involves directly confronting the fear. Ask yourself, what's the absolute worst that could realistically happen? Overthinking loves to conjure up these elaborate, terrifying worst-case scenarios. They feel huge and menacing in your imagination.
Oh yeah, catastrophizing.
Exactly. But when you actually stop and look those fears squarely in the face, they often shrink. So ask yourself, okay, what am I really afraid of here? What is the absolute worst possible outcome? And then this is the crucial follow-up. And if that absolute worst thing did happen, what would I actually do? How would I cope?
What happens when you do that?
More often than not, you'll realize one of 2 things. Either the realistic worst-case scenario isn't nearly as catastrophic as your imagination painted it, or even if it is bad, you'd likely find a way to handle it. You're almost always stronger and more resourceful than your anxious thoughts give you credit for.
So if you're terrified of speaking English in public,
Ask, what's the absolute worst? Maybe I completely freeze up or make several mistakes. Maybe a couple of people snicker. I might feel really embarrassed for a bit. Okay, and then what would I do? Well, I'd survive. The world wouldn't end. I'd feel awkward, maybe practice more, and try again later. Facing it realistically is far more empowering than letting vague, monstrous fears run wild in your head.
confront the worst-case scenario. Makes sense. And the final technique, number 5.
And finally, number 5 is to practice mental redirecting. When your brain starts down that familiar overthinking path, try not to get into a big fight with the thoughts. Fighting a thought, trying to force it away, often just makes it stronger, like trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
Yeah, it just pops back up harder.
Exactly. So instead of fighting, gently redirect your focus onto something else, something neutral or positive. Maybe get up and go for a short walk, paying attention to your steps. Maybe do a simple physical task like washing the dishes or doing a few stretches, focusing on the physical sensations. Or you could repeat a simple, calming phrase to yourself like, right now, in this moment, I'm okay. Or this feeling will pass.
So it's not ignoring it, but gently shifting attention.
Precisely. The goal isn't necessarily permanent distraction, but rather showing your brain there's an alternative path available. It's like gently guiding it out of the dark tunnel of overthinking and towards a different direction.
Okay, so naming thoughts, worry timer, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding, asking what's the worst, and mental redirecting. These sound like really practical tools for managing those overwhelming moments.
They really are. And remember, these techniques aren't magic bullets. They won't instantly erase a lifetime habit of overthinking. But they are tools. And like any tool, the more you practice using them, the better you get. They help you regain control moment by moment.
And over time, with consistent practice, hopefully the mind gets quieter, acting feels easier, and maybe that confidence starts to build.
That's absolutely the goal, building that mental muscle.
Okay, so calming techniques are great for in-the-moment relief. But you mentioned overthinking is often a habit. To make a real, lasting change, we need more than just occasional fixes, right? We need to build a new habit, the habit of clear thinking.
Exactly. Calming the storm is crucial, but changing the weather pattern is the long-term goal, because overthinking often isn't just a reaction to a specific event. It becomes this default, almost automatic way of operating, like, automatically reaching for your phone or brushing your teeth. It runs on autopilot.
So if we want to stop overthinking for good, we need to actively replace that old autopilot setting with a new one.
Precisely. A stronger habit of thinking clearly, thinking with purpose, thinking with a sense of calm and confidence.
So how do we even begin to build that new habit? Where do we start?
Well, first, I'd suggest you start with small, clear decisions. Overthinking absolutely thrives on complexity and ambiguity. Clear thinking, conversely, often starts with simplicity and decisiveness, even in small things.
Like what kind of small things?
Try practicing making everyday, low-stakes decisions quickly and then sticking with them. For example, pick what you're going to eat for lunch in under 60 seconds. Choose your outfit for the day without second-guessing and changing multiple times. Decide when you'll do a small task, put it in your schedule, and then just do it at that time.
These sound almost trivial, but you're saying they help.
They really do. They act like little reps for your decision-making muscle. When your brain sees repeatedly that making a quick choice doesn't lead to disaster, it slowly starts to trust itself more. You could even give yourself tiny time limits, like, okay, I have 30 seconds to decide which route to take. You're essentially training your mind to act without all the unnecessary drama and delay.
I like that. Small wins, building momentum. Okay, what's the second step for building this clear thinking habit?
Second, create a thinking routine. If your thoughts feel chaotic and all over the place, your actions and feelings likely will be too. Mental routines bring structure and intention to your thinking.
What kind of routine?
It doesn't have to be complicated. Try this simple structure. Maybe in the morning, take just a minute to ask yourself, what is my main intention or focus for today? Then perhaps around midday, check in. Am I actually focusing on what matters most right now? And then in the evening, reflect briefly. What did I learn today? Or what went well?
Just those 3 check-ins.
Even just those can make a big difference. Writing them down can make it even more powerful. This practice builds the habit of directed thinking, guiding your mind towards your goals, rather than letting it drift into random worrying or unproductive analysis. It keeps you connected to what's important.
That sounds incredibly practical and manageable. Now, I imagine the people we spend time with must influence our thinking habits too.
Oh, enormously. Which brings us to the third point. Surround yourself consciously with clear thinkers. Have you ever noticed how your own mood or way of thinking can shift depending on who you're interacting with?
Definitely. Someone's really negative, it can bring you down.
Exactly. If you're consistently around people who are constantly worrying, doubting themselves, complaining, getting stuck in problems without seeking solutions, your mind will naturally start to mirror some of those patterns. It's almost like catching a mental cold.
So what's the alternative?
On the flip side, if you spend more time with people who tend to think clearly, who face challenges constructively, who act with reasonable confidence, you'll start to absorb some of that too. It rubs off. Now, this doesn't mean cutting off everyone who struggles with anxiety. It just means being mindful of the dominant influences in your environment.
And it doesn't have to be just people you know personally, right?
Not at all. You can consciously expose yourself to clear thinking through books, podcasts like this one, hopefully, videos with thoughtful, positive content, or seeking out conversations with mentors or supportive friends who model that clarity. Who you choose to follow and listen to, both online and offline, genuinely shapes your thinking more than you probably realize.
Like curating your mental diet or ecosystem. That's a powerful idea. Okay, what about how we treat ourselves during this process? It's not always easy.
That's crucial. Which leads to number 4. Reward action, not perfection. Remember how we said overthinking often stems from perfectionism? That need for everything to be flawless?
Yeah.
Clear, effective thinkers understand a vital truth. Progress is almost always more important than perfection. So you need to start consciously celebrating action, even tiny steps forward.
Celebrate.
Did you actually speak up in that meeting, even if your grammar wasn't perfect? Awesome. Acknowledge that. Did you make a decision relatively quickly, even if later you thought maybe another option was slightly better? Excellent. You acted. Did you finish that task, even if it wasn't your absolute magnum opus? That's a win. Your brain learns through reinforcement. When it gets a positive signal for acting without getting bogged down in overthinking, it becomes more likely to repeat that behavior.
So the reward reinforces the desired action. What kind of rewards?
It doesn't have to be big. It could be allowing yourself a short break, saying a kind word to yourself like good job for trying, or even just writing well done for taking action in a journal. This helps create a positive feedback loop that encourages doing over endless deliberating.
So it's about shifting the internal goalposts from did I do it perfectly to did I actually do it?
Precisely. Shifting focus to effort and progress. And finally, number 5, perhaps the most ongoing practice. Train your self-talk. Your mind is constantly chattering away, that internal monologue, that voice in your head, that's your self-talk. And for many overthinkers, that voice is habitually negative or critical.
Yeah, things like, you're not ready, that was a stupid thing to say, it's bound to go wrong.
Exactly. To build a lasting habit of clear thinking, you absolutely have to consciously work on training that internal voice. You need to gradually shift it from being a harsh critic to being more like a supportive coach.
How do you train it?
When you catch the negative self-talk, Gently challenge it and replace it with something more balanced or constructive. Instead of, this is going to be a disaster, okay, this is challenging, but let's just try and see what happens. Instead of, I'm not good enough to try, I've handled difficult things before, I can handle this too. Or even just, okay, that wasn't perfect, but it was progress.
So it's about actively choosing kinder, more useful language internally.
Yes. You won't eliminate all negative thoughts overnight, maybe never entirely. But if you consistently practice injecting kinder, more realistic, and more encouraging language into your internal dialogue, that itself becomes the new habit over time.
Wow. Okay, so building clear thinking involves starting with small decisions, creating a thinking routine, surrounding yourself with clear thinkers, rewarding action over perfection, and training your self-talk.
That's a great summary. And the key thing is, nobody is just born a perfectly clear thinker. It's a skill, like learning an instrument or a new language.
You don't just wake up fluent one day.
Exactly. You practice consistently, you make mistakes, you learn, you adjust, and gradually it starts to feel more natural. Clear thinking is exactly the same. If you commit to practicing these habits, making those small decisions, having that routine, curating your influences, rewarding action, talking to yourself more kindly than slowly but surely, overthinking will loosen its grip.
And the result is living with more peace, more clarity, and feeling more in control.
That's the destination.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, there's one really core message, isn't there? One final, incredibly powerful idea we want you to really take away.
Yes. And it might sound simple, but understanding it deeply can be truly liberating. It's this. You are not your thoughts.
Say that again.
You are not your thoughts. Think of your thoughts like clouds passing through the vast sky of your awareness. Some clouds are light and fluffy, some are dark and stormy. Some thoughts are helpful, some are painful, some are just random noise. But crucially, none of those clouds are the sky itself. They don't define the sky, and your thoughts don't define you.
That's a powerful image. So overthinking happens when we forget we're the sky and we start believing we are the storm cloud.
Beautifully put, yes. We start believing every single thought that passes through, giving it enormous power, treating it as absolute, undeniable truth. But remember, a thought, fundamentally, is just a little string of words or images in your head. That's all it is.
Just a sentence in your head.
Exactly. And you, the listener, the person experiencing the thought, you have the ability to simply notice it. You can look at it. You can question it. You can investigate if it's actually true or helpful. And you can even choose consciously to just let it drift by without grabbing onto it.
So when that thought, I'm not good enough, pops up.
Oh, you have a choice. You could grab onto it, believe it wholeheartedly, and feel defeated. Or you could take a mental step back and simply observe it. There's that not good enough thought again. Interesting. You just note it, maybe acknowledge it without automatically accepting it as gospel truth. It's just a thought. It doesn't have to be my reality.
That separation creates what you called mental space.
Yeah, precisely. That crucial buffer zone. It's the space between the stimulus, the thought, and your response. And in that space lies your freedom. The freedom to choose a calm, focused, constructive response instead of an automatic, often negative reaction. That's where your power lies. Remember, you are the observer, the awareness behind the thoughts. You are not controlled by them unless you choose to be. You have the power to decide which thoughts get your attention and energy and which ones you allow to just pass on by. That fundamentally is what clear thinking is all about.
Okay, let's quickly recap the journey we took in this deep dive just to consolidate everything.
Good idea.
We started by distinguishing overthinking, that draining, stalling loop, from productive, deep thinking that actually solves problems.
Right. We uncovered some of those hidden triggers lurking beneath the surface. Things like uncertainty, low self-confidence, that fear of judgment, perfectionism, and the echoes of past experiences.
Then we drew that clear line between healthy thinking and mental noise, looking at how thinking solves while overthinking stalls.
How logic guides thinking, while emotion often clouds overthinking.
How thinking leads to decisions, while overthinking breeds hesitation.
How thinking brings clarity while overthinking creates fog.
And how healthy thinking accepts reasonable risk, while overthinking desperately tries to avoid it.
Then we explored the real-world impact, how overthinking messes with your daily life, making decisions a struggle, causing endless conversation replays, disrupting sleep, making you miss the present moment, and causing you to delay or miss opportunities.
And then we got practical. We armed you with those 5 techniques for immediate calm. Naming your thoughts.
Using a worry timer.
The 5-4-3-2-1 grounding method.
Asking what's the real worst that could happen.
And practicing mental redirecting.
And finally, we laid out that roadmap for building a lasting habit of clear thinking. Starting with small, decisive actions, creating a simple thinking routine, consciously surrounding yourself with clearer influences, rewarding your action over chasing perfection, and actively training that inner voice, your self-talk, to be more supportive.
It's definitely a journey, not a quick fix. This takes practice, daily practice.
Absolutely. It's like building any kind of strength or learning any new skill. You won't suddenly be perfectly calm and decisive all the time. There will be days when the old habits feel strong.
You won't always feel in control.
No. But the key is consistency. Keep coming back to these tools. Keep practicing these habits even when it feels hard. And gradually, slowly but surely, you will notice a difference. The overthinking loops might become less frequent or less intense, or you'll catch them sooner.
That's encouraging.
And remember, your brain isn't broken just because it overthinks. It's often just busy, maybe a bit overprotective, trying its best in its own way. And like any complex, busy machine, it can be guided, trained, cared for, reset. Overthinking doesn't mean you're weak or flawed. Actually, it often comes from a place of caring deeply, of being thoughtful and conscientious.
So it's about channeling that thoughtfulness.
Exactly. Learning to be thoughtful with direction rather than just lost in thought. So the next time you feel your mind starting to race, just pause. Take a breath. Remind yourself gently. Okay, I recognize this feeling. This is overthinking starting up. I've been here before, and I have tools. I know what to do.
It's a gentler approach. You don't have to wage war against your mind. You just have to listen to it, learn from it, and then gently lead it in a better direction.
Beautifully said. And remember that core truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the thinker. And you possess far more power to shape your inner world than you probably believe right now.
So maybe the invitation to you, listening now, is to reflect on just one thing from this whole deep dive, one technique, one idea, one habit that you could try differently starting today. Just one small step.